Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs?
What's going on?
My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. Today, we are going to talk about our must-sit players. Guys, you have to sit for Week 7. Rick compiled this list mostly, so it should be interesting. I'm excited.
What are you trying to say, dog?
I'm trying to just deflect blame.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Does that mean I get all the credit, though, if it works pretty well?
No. Absolutely not.
Okay.
I did review the list, and we are good. I do agree with these takes. But anyway, welcome on in. Hopefully you had a good day from since the last time you listened to this episode, and hopefully you're getting ready for Sunday, and you're getting ready for, oh my gosh, we're recording this on Thursday night. There's a football game on tonight.
Yeah, might be, I mean, people will know watching this, so maybe I'm wrong because this is pre-recorded. One of the grossest matchups we're going to get all year.
Oh, who is it?
Broncos and Saints.
What the hell?
The Saints don't have Olave, Raheem Shaheed, or Derek Carr, so their whole offense is injured. And the Broncos don't have Pat Surtain, who's injured, and they're already a gross team to watch in the first place. So it is the line for this, the over-under, I think, is like 36, and I think that might be too high, but we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right, there you go. Well, anyway, we'll get right into the. We'll let you get the show listened to and get ready for your weekend. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the show, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Just type the FF Champs Fantasy Champions. You can find Rick and I also on Twitter. If you're listening on a podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms, please leave a review and share this pod with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like and comment down below. It really helps the show. Let's get to players you have to sit for Week 7. These are guys you got to get out of your lineup yesterday because, frankly, they're not going to have a good week. All right, let's start with the quarterback here. We'll change it up and start with the quarterback. Rick, give us.
This is a guy who's been on fire.
Give us your sit this week.
It's Jared Goff. Jared Goff is a pretty good quarterback in a very good offense. Has had some good weeks this season, especially the last two, coming off 27 points in Week 4 against Seattle, and then 25 fantasy points last week against Dallas. So this is a 4-point touchdown league. So he's been very, very good the last 2 weeks. But with Goff, it's always up and down with him, and it just depends on how.
Last part again, because you went black.
Was that cut out?
Yeah, you cut out.
Just that Goff's not. He does not rely on the rushing game. He only has 21 rushing yards this season, so it's purely passing with Goff. So yeah, he has big weeks, but it's again purely passing. So if he doesn't throw multiple touchdowns, he's not going to have a big fantasy week. And against Minnesota, their defense has been very good this year, which is surprising to me. I did not expect their defense to be this good. Brian Flores has been amazing, probably the best defensive coordinator in the league this year. Their defense has been flying around, and the game is in Minnesota. Goff is kind of just due for one of those games where he might not play that bad in real life, but again, if he doesn't have 300 yards and 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns, he's not going to have a big fantasy week. So I think it's one of those games where Goff probably throws 250 and a touchdown. You might get a second touchdown, might not. And it's one of those games where he gets like 13 fantasy points, where it might not look too bad in real life, but just not going to be putting up fantasy numbers that you want him to.
Yeah. Oh, Jared. He's
just so reliant on passing because he's not going to get any rushing.
Yeah, and I think your points are very fair. This also could end up being an absolute shootout.
That is true.
That's the only thing that concerns me, but like he did have 2 burger games at the beginning of the season, 13-10 fantasy points. So like he's kind of due.
That's who Goff is. Like he's going to have games where he gets like 13
I mean,
points.
for my sake, if I start Jameson Williams this week, hopefully Jared Goff launches missiles.
Well, like I said, I think he's still going to throw a touchdown.
Yeah.
So maybe it will be to Jameson Williams.
Oh, you would hope so. Yeah, he is, Rick's right. He is very reliant on passing. So if the passing aspect of his game is not working, it will be a more difficult matchup. Now, Minnesota gives up 16 fantasy points a game to the quarterback position on average, so they're kind of a middle of the pack team. So not the easiest matchup for Jared Goff. And usually when it's a huge game for Goff, he kind of turns himself slightly. So, and this would be one of those big games for the Detroit Lions. Got to win this one. So, yeah, not a bad one, Rick. I don't mind the sit this week. Especially if you had Goff and Richardson, you're like, who do I go to?
Right. And if you have Jared Goff, you probably have another quarterback who's similar and probably has a better matchup.
For sure. All right, let's move to the running backs here. We have the Bucks running backs versus Baltimore. Listen, Bucky.
This one hurts me, but
you got Bucky Irving. Rick loves Bucky Irving.
I love Bucky.
Friggin', what the hell's his name?
Almost 6 yards a carry this year.
What's the other guy's name? His name is escaping me.
Rachaad White.
Thank you, Rachaad White. These two guys actually, like Rachaad has been.
You can throw one more in the picture now too.
Yeah, I know. There's a third running back here. Who's the third?
John Tucker, baby.
Yeah, freaking A, bro. I mean, let's stop with this nonsense. But either way, just to tell you the snap percentages for these three guys: 64% Bucky Irving last game. Rachaad White did not play, and then you have Sean Tucker who had 38% snap percentage. You know what I've realized? Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving are better running backs than Rachaad White.
They are 100%.
We've gotten to that point. I mean, Rachaad White did have a decent efficiency. He had decent efficiency the last 2 weeks against Philly and Atlanta, but there's been some issues with the other two.
He had like a 60-yard run against Atlanta, so he had 9 carries for like 12 yards before that play. But the problem is White is like the starting running back. So even if Tucker and Irving are outplaying him, like they're not going to just throw him on the bench. Todd Bowles said today, the day we're recording the podcast, that all three will get playing time, and we plan on writing the hot hand. That was the quote. So, I don't know what to do with the backfield.
Yeah, I think
it's gross.
Busy backfields, like Rick said, not a great thing to target. On top of that, they play the 5th hardest matchup in fantasy football.
Right.
in the Baltimore Ravens. And if you're playing this team, Baltimore has not been great against the pass all year. They've kind of been getting cooked. But against the run, they've been excellent. And they've only given up 14 fantasy points a game to the running back position. So if you have 3 guys getting mixed in here,
it's just a recipe for disaster.
15 fantasy points to pass around. It's a recipe for disaster. So this is a really good sit this week. If you're fighting over what Bucks player to start, or whether you should start a Bucks running back, you should just set them all. I don't think that this is a week to get.
I wouldn't be surprised if one of them has an okay game, but like I don't even know who it would be. My guess is it would probably be Bucky if I had to pick one, but I wouldn't trust it at all. And Rachaad White maybe too, like if he has a good passing game, but like I don't know. It's just really hard to bet. And as you said, the Ravens have a really good defense, so that just makes it even worse.
Yeah. All right. That was a pretty simple one. Let's talk about Alexander Mattison at the Los Angeles Rams. Mattison, he was kind of an interesting guy at the beginning of the season because he actually was okay for the Raiders. And he's had a couple of decent weeks. The last 2 weeks, 10 and 17.
Do you see what his yards per carry is in those last 2 games?
Oh, it's brutal. Awful. No good. But he's getting pass catching work, so that's all that really matters.
He is.
He's just about as inefficient as you would anticipate. The Raiders suck. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a running back. They don't have any receivers anymore. It's just a disaster in Raider land over there. The only thing they got is Thomas Edward Brady owning 5% of their football team.
That's their biggest positive of the week.
Yeah, I guess. But they're going up against the Los Angeles Rams this week, and it's not going to be an easy matchup for them. The Rams have given up, I think, 17.
The Rams haven't been.
Points.
I don't know if the matchup is necessarily too bad. The main reason I put Madison on this list, is because you look at these last 2 weeks and you're like, well, he's put up fantasy points, but it's been because of the volume. He's been so inefficient. He has 2 yards a carry. And the volume is likely going away this week because Zamir White has missed the last 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
So with Zamir White coming back, it's going to be a split again. And it's just a disgusting split.
Yeah.
Because when Zamir White was healthy in the first 4 games, Madison was averaging about four carries a game. He does still have the passing work, which means he could have a floor of like 8 points. But I don't think he's getting more than like 6 carries this week. And that's just a hard thing to be successful with in fantasy unless he's getting like 5 catches, which is possible, but I don't think it's likely with Zamir White coming back.
Yeah, those are all fair points. Maybe Zamir White's a good play this week.
You think so?
No, I don't. No. The Raiders suck. I think that's the main.
I don't trust anyone on the Raiders.
That's what I was going to say. That's the main.
Maybe Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers.
Yeah. I would say the main thing.
Bowers definitely. Maybe Myers.
I would say the thing with the running back position with the Raiders is that it's going to be one that people fight over a lot and not really get any production. So
Right,
if you're
exactly.
happy with 10 points from the running back position or 8 or 9 points, then go ahead and start Alexander Madison this week. But I would search for another option. Obviously, there's bye weeks, so if you have to go in that direction, then you can go for it. But yeah, Madison, not a bad play. George Pickens is the next up, and he's going up against the New York Jets. George Pickens, man,
one that hurts me a little bit, but...
Rick is a dude who has had Pickens on his team all season. And
I didn't even all off season. I was like kind of out on Pickens, and then I drafted him.
You were like, "Hey, you know what? I'll do it." And so far this year, target share has kind of been there a little bit.
Target share is fine.
Target share has been okay, but he's like, you look at his performances so far this year, and then you look at Pop Douglas's performances, and it's kind of been like almost the same.
Yeah.
So. He's had one really good game on the year, hasn't caught a touchdown yet. He's kind of been inefficient and inconsistent. And, before the season started, I was talking about Matt Harmon's reception perception profile on George Pickens and how it was kind of like a mixed bag with this guy where he's a good route runner. He makes plays. He can get open and pretty much against any kind of coverage. His problem is his mentality. Is some weeks he shows up and he's mentally there, and some weeks he shows up and he's not. And so you're just going to have these really inconsistent weeks. So you'll have these weeks where he gets 16, 17 fantasy points, or he'll catch a touchdown and get into the 20s, and he'll be really good, and he'll go off. And then there'll be these weeks where he just disappears because he doesn't give a crap. So that's a George Pickens experience to a T, and that's kind of what he's been all season. He's going up against the New York Jets, who frankly have not been great on the season, but one thing they do well is play defense, and they stop the receivers from scoring fantasy points. They are 4th toughest, giving up 20 fantasy points a game to the wide receiver position. So it's not going to be an easy matchup for George Pickens. It's not going to be a good game for him to get in, and while he's been inconsistent at times this year, and he's had some games where he can play, it's not going to be good for Pickens this week.
Yeah, I think this is one of those games where Pickens is it's just hard to start him right now because he hasn't been great all year.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a touchdown yet. He has had flashes. He's had good games, but overall just hasn't been what you wanted him to be. And now he's playing a Jets team where he's probably going to be matched up against Sauce Gardner all game.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like it. And the Jets defense has been really kind of struggling this year, but it's been mostly against the run. Against the pass, they're still very, very good. And as you said, they're 4th against receivers. And I honestly thought it was going to be higher. I thought they would be top 3, but even at number 4, like they're still very, very good against receivers. It's just a really tough matchup for a guy who just already hasn't kind of disappointed. So this is a week I'd probably leave him on your bench if you can. I'm benching him this week, which is the first time this season that I have. But he's just kind of been disappointing, and it's a tough matchup. Hopefully you're looking for him to bounce back next week because his next couple matchups, it gets a little easier against the Giants and Commanders. But this week is just tough.
Okay. Let's get to the next guy. I mean, we're blowing through these guys. I feel like. But let's talk about Romeo Doubs versus Houston. Rick, take it away on Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, Romeo Doubs. Everybody was he was kind of like a flyer, a late round guy in the beginning of the year and then disappointed. And then this week he had like the falling out with Matt LaFleur, got suspended for a game. comes back and gets 20 fantasy points and 2 touchdowns, and everybody loses their minds. Uh, he's been like trending on X. Is like, oh, this guy, like, he's finally back. This is the player that we know he is. All this stuff. Um, I think last week was kind of a get right game for him, where they were looking for him early. He still only had 3 catches and 4 targets, despite the 20 fantasy points because he scored 2 touchdowns. So for the people that are all over Romeo Doubs, and probably going to put him in their lineup this week, I wouldn't do that. Playing against Houston. Houston is a pretty decent defense. I think they've been very good against the pass. As we know as Patriots fans leading up to the week, we saw the stats of quarterbacks. I think Drake May this past week against Houston had the best week passing of any quarterback. So although Green Bay's offense has been elite, Jordan Love's had a monster season. There's too many mouths to feed there in Green Bay to really rely on Romeo Doubs in a tough matchup. And I know some people are excited about him, especially if you like the player, but not this week against Houston.
Yeah, the Packers have a lot of like random stuff going on with the receiver position. Like it could be like the only consistent
outside of Reed, they just throw it to whoever.
Yeah, it's just inconsistent. It could be Watson, it could be Doubs, it could be Wicks, it could be anyone.
Right.
This past week, it was Romeo Doubs against Arizona with 19 fantasy points. So, do I think that's going to happen this upcoming week against Houston? No. Rick, you were asking me that question about Jordan Love, and I didn't know he was playing Houston. So now I'm concerned.
Well, that's why I asked the question in the first place.
Okay, so maybe you should go Kyler Murray.
Oh. I looked at Fantasy Pros. They have Jordan Love as QB5 this week, and Kyler Murray is QB12.
Yeah, I don't know about that nonsense.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Romeo Doubs just against Houston is just it's kind of a no-go. Like if you have him on your team and you're like, oh, should I play him this week? I'm not sure who to play. I would take this guy out of your starting lineup. It's going to not be an easy matchup. The one thing I do think could be a benefit for him is the fact that he's not going to line up. They've missing. I think they're missing their slot corner. And they have this guy named Petrie who's playing in place of him, and he just got shredded.
Doesn't Doubs not play the slot though?
Right, he lines up inside and outside.
He does, okay.
But
I feel like Reed usually lines up inside, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
But Petrie sucks. He's terrible.
Okay.
I mean, the Patriots cooked him. So, you never know because he's the third guy. This could be another go-off week for Doubs and everyone's running to the waiver wire. But I think the likelihood of that is pretty low, and that I think Doubs is probably the odd man out this week against Houston. I agree, Rick.
Yeah.
With Romeo Doubs. All right, final guy. I hate this one, Rick, but give us your tight end set of the week. Oh, God.
I know. I didn't want to do this to you, but it is Mark Andrews. I'm just looking at some of the top tight ends this week in terms of fantasy points and who they're playing against. Mark Andrews had the toughest matchup according to Fantasy Pros. I believe it is a 2-star matchup this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Andrews had such a bad start to the season. People were dropping him. Last 2 weeks, he's kind of come back to where we were hoping for a little bit. 9 and 15 fantasy points, very, very good. But he still is not getting a lot of snap percentage, which concerns me. And the targets, although at least he's getting more than 1 target a game, he's still not super high at 4 to 5 targets. And that is concerning. And against Tampa, I don't know if I love it. Coming off a week with a touchdown. I hope I'm wrong. But just kind of looking at all things considered and some of the other top tight ends who all have pretty easy matchups this week. Andrews is just it's tough. It's tough.
Oh, Mark. I'm gonna start him anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's fair.
Let's start him anyway.
I mean,
50% snap percentage just as buns.
It really is. It's gross.
It's not good. Not good.
You're relying on basically a touchdown every week.
Yeah, I don't love that. Don't love it. Well, anyway.
He did. I mean, 3 catches for 66 yards is pretty good. So if he does that, then that's 9 fantasy points right there.
Yeah, tight ends are just god awful this year. It hurts my soul. But anyway, hopefully you get these guys out of your starting lineup, get some dubs this week. We do have trade targets coming up. Rick may or may not be there. He's going away this weekend. But thanks for listening to the show. Leave a comment. See you later, guys.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.